The rain tapped against the window pane in an uneven rhythm, like it was trying to tell her something she couldn't yet understand. Eliza pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the street shimmer under the glow of old lampposts. Everything felt suspended. Time, expectation, even her own thoughts. She had always loved quiet nights like this, the kind that made the world feel intimate, yet distant at the same time. It was past 10 p.m., and the house was unusually still. Her brother, Mason, had gone out with friends, claiming it was just a casual get-together. Yet the sound of footsteps on the porch drew her attention immediately. She wasn't expecting anyone. And then the door creaked, and in walked a familiar presence she hadn't realized she had been waiting for. Logan. Mason's childhood friend, now a man who carried a quiet authority in the way he moved, yet somehow still retained the mischievous boyishness that Mason often described. He smiled when he saw her, a subtle tilt of his head, almost apologetic, as though he knew he had caught her off guard. "Eliza," he said softly. "Sorry to drop in like this." She shook her head, trying to gather composure. "It's fine. I didn't expect anyone anyway." Her voice sounded small in the empty living room. He shrugged, but there was a tension in the air, a weight neither of them spoke aloud. They had known each other for years, in a sense, but tonight felt different. There was something about the way Logan's eyes held hers that made her pulse a little faster, though she hated the thought that Mason could ever see it. "Can I stay for a bit?" he asked, more to herself than to the empty room. There was vulnerability in that simple question. Eliza nodded, stepping aside. "Of course." She led him to the couch, and they both sank into the worn cushions in silence. Outside, the rain seemed to soften, as though it too was holding its breath. They started with small talk. Mason had been busy, his life sprawling in unpredictable directions, and Logan had been traveling for work. Yet every word felt weighted, every pause deliberate. Eliza couldn't help noticing how his presence seemed to fill the room, how familiar yet foreign it felt to just sit near him, without the noise of their shared history as children. "You've grown," she finally said, almost as an observation rather than a compliment. He gave a small laugh, shaking his head. "I think we all have, or at least we try." The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. There was something in the way he spoke, something patient, like he was untangling his words carefully so they wouldn't hurt or confuse. And for a moment, she realized she had been holding her breath the entire evening. They drifted into silence again, watching the streetlights blur against the wet pavement. Logan's presence was grounding, yet it stirred memories she wasn't sure she wanted to revisit. Memories of Mason and her, of laughter echoing through old rooms, of nights that had seemed endless in their safety and warmth. Then, unexpectedly, Logan spoke again. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes the people we expect the least to change are the ones who stay with us the longest." Eliza blinked, unsure how to respond. The line seemed simple, but its weight pressed against her heart. She felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from recognition. He was speaking to more than just her, more than just the casual familiarity of old friendship. And somehow, she felt like she was seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time. Her thoughts raced, circling the question she didn't dare ask. What did he mean by that? And why did it feel like he was speaking directly to her own hidden fears and hopes? If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Logan's eyes met hers, lingering in a way that made her stomach tighten. The room felt suddenly smaller, the world beyond the windows fading into the quiet rain. She wanted to speak, to bridge the distance between what she felt and what she could articulate, but the words refused to come. Instead, they simply sat there, side by side, enveloped by an unspoken understanding. And in that moment, Eliza realized that some connections, once formed, never truly fade. They linger, quietly shaping the spaces between people. Then, as if sensing her inner turmoil, Logan shifted slightly. "Do you ever feel like some moments are meant to happen, even if we don't understand why until later?" he asked. Eliza turned to him, her heart thudding in a way she couldn't hide. She opened her mouth to reply, but the words caught in her throat. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, but inside, something had shifted, something delicate, something irreversible. The night deepened, and the soft hum of the rain against the roof felt like a companion to her restless thoughts. Eliza remained on the couch, still near Logan, still caught between curiosity and caution. It was strange, this sense of familiarity that didn't quite feel like friendship, yet wasn't anything else she could name. Logan leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the ceiling, as if the answers he sought were hiding there. "I always thought time made everything easier," he said, his voice low, reflective. "But sometimes it just adds layers." Eliza nodded, her hands clasped loosely in her lap. "Layers," she echoed softly. "I know what you mean. Things get complicated, but it's like you carry pieces of the past with you, whether you like it or not." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Exactly." "And sometimes you run into someone who makes those pieces feel alive again." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to say something, to ask him what he meant, but fear held her tongue. It was as if speaking aloud might shatter the fragile honesty of the moment. They fell into another silence, broken only by the occasional patter of raindrops. Eliza found herself observing him in a way she hadn't before, every small gesture, every subtle expression. There was a calmness in his presence that was almost soothing, yet beneath it she sensed a quiet tension. "I've always admired your patience," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her then, surprised. "Mine?" "Yes," she replied, meeting his eyes. "You have this way of listening, of really noticing people, not just seeing them, but noticing them." Logan's lips curved into a soft, appreciative smile. "I learned that from Mason, actually. Being around him makes you more aware, more present." The mention of her brother brought a warm, bittersweet ache to her chest. Mason was gone for the night, but somehow his absence made Logan's presence even more profound. She realized that this moment, the quiet, the shared understanding, was rare, and she wanted to hold on to it, even if just for a little while longer. "Do you ever think about the choices we make?" Logan asked, turning slightly toward her. "The ones that seem small at the time, but end up defining so much?" Eliza's mind raced. Every choice, every path taken, had led her here, to this night, to this conversation. "All the time," she admitted, "and sometimes I wonder if I'd do things differently, if I had the chance." He nodded, thoughtful. "Me too. But maybe it's not about changing the past. Maybe it's about understanding it and learning how to move forward." The room felt warmer, more intimate, as though the rain had softened into a gentle hum that mirrored the rhythm of her heart. She realized she had been holding her breath, waiting for something undefined to happen, and perhaps it already had, quietly, without fanfare. For a long moment, they simply shared the silence, the kind that didn't need words because it said more than conversation ever could. Eliza felt a subtle shift in the air, a sense of connection that neither of them had acknowledged before. "You know," Logan said after a pause, his voice hesitant, "I've always believed that people leave traces in your life that you can't erase, no matter how far you go. And sometimes those traces come back when you least expect them." Eliza swallowed hard, the truth in his words resonating in a way that startled her. She realized she had spent so much time thinking of Logan as just Mason's friend, just a part of her brother's world, that she hadn't allowed herself to consider the impact he might have on hers. "Maybe that's why some nights feel different," she said softly. "Like they're meant to be remembered, even if we don't understand why yet." Logan's gaze softened, lingering on her with an intensity that wasn't overwhelming, but somehow grounding. "I think you're right," he admitted. "Some nights, they change you, quietly, and you only realize it later." A faint smile tugged at her lips, the kind that came from relief and understanding, a sense of shared recognition. She wanted to ask him more,
to understand the depth of what he was saying, but the moment was fragile, and sometimes the quiet moments mattered more than words ever could. The rain slowed outside, leaving a gentle mist that coated the windows. Eliza felt a stirring of something unfamiliar, a quiet awareness of how fleeting yet profound certain connections could be. And as she glanced at Logan, she knew this was one of those nights that would linger in her memory long after the storm passed. Then, without warning, he spoke again, his tone softer than before. "Eliza, have you ever wondered if someone can see right into the parts of you you thought were hidden forever?" Her heart skipped a beat, and a rush of warmth spread through her chest. She wanted to answer, but the words tangled on her tongue. She only knew that the question hung between them, delicate and undeniable, drawing her closer in ways she wasn't prepared to fully understand. Eliza felt the weight of Logan's question settle over her, soft but insistent.
She had never considered that someone could see beyond the careful walls she had built around herself. It was both unsettling and comforting, like standing on the edge of a familiar cliff and realizing there was a whole world she had never noticed. I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never really thought about it. I've always assumed people see what I let them see." Logan nodded slowly, leaning back, eyes focused somewhere beyond the walls of her living room, as if the answer existed in the distance. "Most of us do, but some people, they notice things we don't even realize we're giving away. Even the quiet moments, the small hesitations, they notice it all." Eliza's gaze dropped to her hands, twisting the hem of her sweater. She wondered, fleetingly, if Mason ever realized how much his friend had changed, how much depth he carried now that he was older. There was something about the way Logan listened, the way he spoke, that made her feel seen without having to explain herself. "You make it sound like a superpower," she said with a soft laugh, though it felt fragile, hesitant. Logan smiled, faint but genuine. "Maybe it is," he said. "Or maybe it's just paying attention, being present, really present. So few people do that these days." Her mind drifted, remembering countless conversations with others that had felt hollow, the words floating past without leaving any mark. And yet, here was Logan, quietly observing, quietly understanding. She realized she had underestimated him, as if she had only ever seen the shadow of the person he was meant to become. The clock ticked somewhere in the background, unnoticed by both of them. Outside, the mist had begun to lift, leaving the streets glistening with the faint promise of dawn. But inside, time felt suspended, the world reduced to the small room, the faint light, and the presence of someone who was quietly significant. Eliza dared a glance at Logan and caught him looking at her, not in the way one might look out of curiosity, but with attention, with care. It was the kind of look that made her chest tighten, a gentle pressure that was not uncomfortable, but undeniably real. "Do you ever feel like life puts certain people in your path for a reason?" he asked suddenly, turning slightly so his shoulder brushed hers. The touch was brief, but it left a warmth lingering in the space between them. She nodded, words failing her. She had spent so many nights wondering why certain friendships lasted and others faded, why some connections felt eternal and some seemed to vanish before they had a chance to grow. And yet in that quiet, unassuming moment, she felt the truth of his question resonate deep within her. "I do," she admitted softly. "Sometimes it's like everything else fades away, and you only notice the people who matter, even if you don't understand why yet." Logan's eyes softened, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Exactly. Even the quiet ones, the moments that don't seem significant at the time, they linger, and sometimes they change us more than we realize." Eliza's mind wandered to memories she had tucked away, childhood laughter, whispered conversations in the dark, the way Mason and Logan had shared their own world while she had observed from the sidelines. Those fragments of the past, she realized, were pieces of a puzzle she hadn't yet fully seen, and now in Logan's presence, the edges were slowly fitting together. "You've changed,"
she said finally, her voice barely audible. Not in ways I can fully describe, but I notice it. You carry something different now, something steady. He nodded, as though accepting the acknowledgement without needing further explanation. Life has a way of teaching us patience, he said, sometimes through people, sometimes through experiences. But it all adds up, doesn't it? Every little moment shapes who we become. Her chest tightened at the truth of his words. She wanted to ask him more, to understand the layers he carried, the quiet wisdom hidden beneath his calm exterior. But she also knew that some things were revealed slowly, in their own time. For a moment they simply sat together, the silence around them no longer empty, but filled with unspoken understanding.
Eliza realized that she had been waiting for something, perhaps clarity, perhaps connection, and in this quiet, she had found both. And then Logan leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping to a murmur that was almost swallowed by the dim light. Sometimes, he said, the people we think we know best are the ones who surprise us most when we least expect it. Eliza felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name, a soft ache of anticipation mingled with curiosity. She wanted to ask him to explain, to elaborate, but the words dissolved before they could form. Instead, she just nodded, letting the moment linger, delicate and fragile, like a candle flickering in the dark. The mist outside had begun to thin, but inside, the quiet was complete, and in that stillness, Eliza knew that whatever unfolded next, whether in hours, days, or years, it would start here, in this fragile, unspoken understanding. The first light of dawn crept through the edges of the curtains, painting the room in soft golds and muted grays. Eliza stirred, her mind still tangled in the quiet intensity of the night. Logan had stayed longer than she expected, and yet the hours had slipped by without notice. The way he had listened, the way he had spoken, it all lingered like a gentle echo she couldn't shake. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warmth, the small comfort of routine, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him, to the subtle truths he had shared, to the feeling of being truly seen. It was strange, almost disarming, to realize how deeply a presence could settle into one's heart without fanfare or expectation. Logan, she realized, had a way of drawing her attention to what really mattered without demanding it. It was never about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was quiet, steady, patient. She thought about Mason, about the laughter and noise that usually filled their lives, and felt a bittersweet appreciation for the contrast. Some moments were meant to be soft, meant to linger, and this was one of them. The phone buzzed on the table, but she ignored it, letting herself remain in the fragile cocoon of the room. Logan's words replayed in her mind, the ones about life leaving traces, the ones about people surprising us when we least expect it. They resonated differently now in the clarity of morning light, filling her with a gentle sense of anticipation she couldn't quite name. When he spoke again, it was not in words, but in the quiet way he leaned back in the chair across from her. She noticed the small details she hadn't before, the curve of his smile, the calm steadiness in his posture, the way his gaze seemed to carry patience for everything around him. She wondered how she had missed these things all along, or perhaps she had simply never allowed herself to see. "I've never really thanked you," she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice sounded timid, almost hesitant. "For listening, for understanding. I don't know if anyone else would have noticed." Logan tilted his head, his expression unreadable for a moment. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "I think we notice the people we're meant to notice. It's not always obvious at the time." Eliza felt warmth rise to her cheeks. His words carried an honesty she hadn't expected. They were not empty niceties, not polite assurances. They were simple truths, quietly offered, quietly accepted. And for some reason, she felt the need to hold on to them, to memorize them, to carry them forward like a talisman. Outside, the sun had begun to climb higher, and the mist had all but vanished. The day beckoned with promises of errands, calls, and responsibilities. But inside the room,
time seemed suspended. Eliza realized she didn't want this moment to end. Not the calm, not the understanding, not the unspoken connection that seemed to bridge years of familiarity and distance all at once. "You always have a way of saying things that stick," she said, almost shyly, "even when I don't fully understand them in the moment." Logan smiled faintly, a warmth that didn't need words to be understood. "Maybe some things aren't meant to be understood right away," he replied. "Some truths reveal themselves slowly, over time, through experience and reflection. You just feel them first." The honesty of that sentiment touched her deeply. She realized that life wasn't about rushing to explanations or resolutions. Sometimes it was about letting moments exist, letting people speak softly, and letting connections unfold naturally. And in that realization, she felt a serenity she hadn't experienced in years. Yet, as she leaned back in her chair, a thought crept unbidden into her mind. What if this moment, delicate and fleeting, was a turning point she wasn't prepared to recognize? What if the simplicity of quiet presence carried weight she hadn't anticipated, shaping the way she would view the people she cared about forever? Logan glanced at her then, as if sensing the swirl of questions inside her. "Eliza, some moments are quieter than others, but they leave traces all the same. They shape us, guide us, even if we only realize it later." Her chest tightened and she swallowed hard. She wanted to ask him more, about what he meant, about what he had seen, but the words seemed to drift away before she could reach them. She understood, in a quiet, undeniable way, that some truths were best felt first, understood later. The room seemed to hum with that unspoken understanding. The connection between them, delicate yet firm, had grown into something she couldn't ignore. A gentle curiosity, a lingering warmth, a subtle anticipation, all of it coalesced into a quiet awareness that this night, this morning, had changed something inside her. And just as she was beginning to let the peace settle, Logan's voice broke the quiet again. "Eliza, sometimes people don't realize the weight of what they say until years later. A single line, a single moment, it can stay with you forever." Her heart skipped, her thoughts caught between the past and the present. She wanted to ask him to explain, to tell her which moment he meant, but he only smiled softly, eyes filled with that steady patience that seemed to hold secrets she might not yet be ready to hear. Eliza sat by the window, the morning sunlight spilling across the wooden floor, warming the quiet corners of the room. She could still feel Logan's presence lingering, subtle but undeniable, like the last trace of a dream that refuses to fade. The night had changed something, though she couldn't name exactly what. It was a small, quiet shift, but enough to make the familiar world feel slightly different. Logan had left hours ago, stepping into the crisp morning air with the same calm certainty he carried into every room he entered. Yet Eliza's mind remained tethered to him, to the words he had spoken, to the moments when his gaze had met hers with a gentle understanding. She traced the outline of a memory, the one line he had said that had stayed with her. Sometimes people don't realize the weight of what they say until years later. A single line, a single moment, it can stay with you forever. Her fingers rested on the edge of the window pane, and she thought about Mason, about the laughter and arguments, about the moments that had seemed ordinary at the time, but now shimmered with new significance. Life had a way of layering itself, she realized, and Logan had shown her one of those layers tonight, a quiet one that held more meaning than she had expected. The day stretched ahead with all its routines and obligations, yet she felt an unspoken invitation to slow down, to notice the details she often overlooked. The steam rising from her mug, the soft rustle of leaves outside, the way the light shifted through the room, they all felt different, more vivid somehow. She realized that some nights didn't end when the sun rose. They simply transformed, carrying their lessons into the day. Her thoughts drifted back to Logan, and she found herself smiling at the memory of his quiet patience, the way he had listened, the subtle way he had guided the conversation without ever pressuring her. He had a presence that reminded her of how it felt to be truly seen, and for the first time in a long while, She allowed herself to imagine that such understanding could exist beyond a single night. And yet there was an ache there too, the ache of knowing that some connections were fragile, delicate, and not easily defined. She hadn't known what to expect from Logan's visit, but now that it had happened, she felt both richer and more vulnerable.
It was a paradox, the way meaningful moments often were. Eliza picked up her journal, the one she kept tucked on the shelf for quiet reflections. She wrote his line down, letting the words settle on paper as though anchoring the memory, capturing it before it could drift away. She scribbled slowly, letting her emotions flow, the ink tracing not just words, but the lingering sense of connection, of understanding, of a night that had changed her, quietly, profoundly. Later, when Mason returned, the house seemed to hum with ordinary life once again. He carried his usual energy, the chatter of his friends fading behind him, but Eliza felt the calm from earlier still resting inside her. Mason noticed the serenity on her face, a subtle shift he didn't question. Sometimes, she thought, understanding doesn't need to be explained. It simply exists between people who notice each other. Over the next few days, Eliza found herself replaying the evening in her mind. The line he had said, the way he had looked at her, the moments of quiet connection, they all seemed small on the surface, yet monumental beneath. She understood now that life often whispered lessons through gentle encounters, and Logan's presence had been exactly that, a quiet guidepost, a reminder that attention, care, and patience could leave lasting impressions. She smiled at the thought, realizing that sometimes the people we expect the least to impact our lives are the ones whose words linger the longest. And she knew she would carry that line with her, the weight of it, the truth of it, the subtle warmth of a connection she hadn't anticipated. Eliza closed her journal, setting it gently on the table, and felt a soft contentment settle over her. The world outside continued as it always had, but inside, she carried the quiet resonance of a night she would remember. And though Logan had left, his presence lingered, not in the physical sense, but in the way one person can quietly change how another sees life, how they notice, how they feel. For the first time in a long while, Eliza felt a calm certainty that some moments, no matter how fleeting, leave permanent traces. They shape the way we remember, the way we understand, and sometimes the way we move forward. And as she looked out at the world, she knew that line, that simple truth, would stay with her, carrying a quiet power she could feel in her chest and in her heart. It was not dramatic, it was not loud, but it was enough. It was everything. And for Eliza, that was more than she could have hoped for.